Well, after that great lunch that we have, uh, now we are about to have a quick and very special uh, um, presentation. And if y'all will return to your seats here, we'll get started because then we have another special presentation that we're going to hear, and then we're going to head over to the dedication on that. Mr. Speaker, we're going to ask you to come up to the podium there. Ladies and gentlemen, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, our friend, our great leader, the one that cares so much about Georgia and has done so much for Georgia in the last years that he's been Speaker. And we are just delighted to have you today, Mr. Speaker. This is our last meeting of the House Rural Development. And we want to thank you for the opportunity to serve on this, and thank you for your confidence in us. And we'll get you some presentments here pretty soon, recommendations from the council. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Justin has a lookout for me. Appreciate y'all. Leo, all I need to know is, has everyone earned their per diem on all these meetings? That's what we need to make sure of. I'm sure you have. Thank you guys for y'all's service. I know you've been all over the state and you've seen some terrible scenes in South Georgia and generational damage. And talk a little bit about that. I know y'all have had a focus there, but certainly want to thank Chairman Green and Chairman Jackson for their work pulling together to make sure the work of this group is always on task. And I look forward to that report as well. You know, we all know that all over Georgia, the governor likes to brag on every zip code is seen as benefiting from economic development. So we know that along with great opportunity comes great challenges. And we know that we need to be a part of ensuring that infrastructure is in place for those challenges from workforce housing, education, health care, all of those things. But y'all have also focused, and I'm appreciative of this, that you're focusing on places that need infrastructure before they can have that great opportunity. And that's a part of what we do as well. I know it is in my district that we need some infrastructure. And then we'll be able to accommodate those great opportunities when they come along. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing y'all's thoughts on how we can address some of those needs across the state. I think all it takes is money, and we have a little bit of that. So we have the resources, I think, Mr. Chairman, to address some of those needs. Yes, sir. Wait a minute.
Who has been so instrumental in pushing the concept of literacy, and we know that literacy is so important in the state of Georgia, and she's our number one champion of that, and we certainly appreciate her. Let's give her a round of applause here. We're just glad to have y'all with us, and it was very important that you come today and sort of close us out here.
Well, we want to do that. I want to remind all the members of the House here. Al, Butch, y'all serve with Mr. Jones or Mr. Paul? This great facility is named in honor of Jones Lane, Bob's father, and Paul D. Smith, two long-serving members of the Georgia House that did great work for not only Georgia Southern, but all of Georgia. Thank you, Annalee, for having this group here. Last thing I want to tell you is that we've suffered through Helene. Now, if we don't learn and take home, and thank you, Chairman Tankersley, by the way, I see you there. I know you could not stand to be away from us for any longer than you had to be. So thanks for your continued presence and your support and your friendship as well. But if we don't take home some lessons from what our people have experienced through this tragedy, this generational damage that this hurricane brought to all of South Georgia, in one way or the other, then we're not doing our job. Whether supporting the health care, the backup facilities for health care, I know y'all have looked at that. That part of the issue is what we need to do there. what we need just to strengthen our infrastructure in a general sense. So I think the lessons we'll learn in South Georgia will be lessons that we can take to North Georgia, when tragedy strikes North Georgia, when tragedy strikes anywhere in our state, that we'll be a better, stronger communities than better neighbors. And y'all also know, I like to put it this way, a lot of my faith in mankind has been restored. As we worked our way through this tragedy of this storm up in Mac's area, we saw members of the House all over Georgia reach out and take their time, their treasure, to ensure that our people were taken care of. And I will tell you, as one of the people who've benefited, Bill, you have, Lisa, you have benefited from their efforts. Butch, you have, Mac, you have, Al, we've all benefited from their efforts to look out for their neighbor. I'm eternally grateful, not only to the members of the House that made that extra effort. They've been in Georgia, they've been in North Carolina, they've taken care of neighbors all around the Southeast, as many, many other people. I know, Rick, you were part of that team, and I appreciate what you've done, and a lot of other people, private citizens and corporations that we know, businesses around the state, right, Butch, that have stepped out and helped Swainsboro and Emmanuel County, all over this state. You have to feel good about when you see things like that occurring, even though this terrible damage we've experienced. And we'll come back stronger, and with help and insight that you guys have been able to put together is going to be a critical part for us and all Georgians to do our part to help each other, help ourselves. So thank you all for what y'all been doing. We look forward to this, a great member of this community, a great member of the General Assembly, and a great friend to everyone I look around this table today, Senator Jack Hill, as we honor he and Ruth Ann with this great naming of this wonderful facility that Jack Hill had a vision for. Much of the vision of Georgia Southern and the great facilities we have here came from Jack Hill. We know that. But to really honor him with the facility, this Convocation Center, is a special, special day. So I appreciate y'all willingness to take part of that. Mr. Chairman, I took too long, but I appreciate you letting me do this. Mr. Chairman, thank you for y'all's friendship, and we look forward to working with you. Leo, get the paperwork in. We'll see if we can get them paid. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We really appreciate the leadership that you provide. And thank you for appointing these members. They have been absolutely great through our meetings to really bring some insight into what was being presented. So we really appreciate that. Look forward to the meeting for the dedication here in a little while. And right now we have a good presentation from that's going to be presented to the committee here. So Justin, if y'all come on up, bud. Justin is my constituent, so I've known Justin a long time and really appreciate what he stands for and works for throughout the state of Georgia. And Ryan, we appreciate you being here, so we're going to turn it over to y'all and let you go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Justin Strickland from Albany, Georgia. I work for Omnitrax, where I'm the Director of Industrial and Economic Development, serving the east coast of our network of railroads. We own 28 railroads or manage 28 railroads across the country. 4 of the best railroads we have are right here in the state of Georgia. There's a Georgia-Florida Railroad starts in Albany, goes into North Florida. Fulton County Railroad is just south of Six Flags at Fulton Industrial. The Georgia Woodlands Railroad is in Washington, Georgia, about halfway between Augusta and Athens. And then we have built in Rincon a new railroad on 2,700 acres that we manage in conjunction with the Effingham County Industrial Development Authority. So we built a railroad between CSX and Norfolk Southern to serve customers there. So I'm very, very pleased to be here today to present to the House Rural Development Council. And I will introduce Ryan Peaty from Mickelson, who's here with me. Ryan works with us all over the country on tax matters and working on tax credit programs that other states have used. So I'll turn it over to Ryan to introduce himself.
Thanks, Justin. Good afternoon, everyone, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. My name is Ryan Peedy. I'm with Mickelson and Company. Live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, but work with short line railroads all across the United States and almost all the short lines in the state of Georgia. Mostly focused on how do you pay for infrastructure, rail infrastructure, how do you improve it for the ultimate benefit of the customers and creating new economic development opportunities. And so part of what we're going to talk about today and really tag team on this effort is to just frame up, where there's an opportunity for the state to really accelerate its position as a leader in economic development. And a lot of it revolves around building new rail infrastructure, connecting industrial parks to the national rail network, which ultimately leads to job opportunities. And Justin can talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that he's seen from the OmniTrax perspective, but also from his deep experience in economic development in the state of Georgia. So we'll run through this. If there's questions along the way, feel free to chime in. So, as you're all aware, Georgia is rated the top economic development in about every category. And specifically, when it relates to supply chain, distribution hubs, infrastructure, and access to the global markets. Over the next 30 years, freight movements are forecasted to double. That's not just rail, that's truck, that's every category you can about imagine. And there's already congestion points in the state, in the country, and so one of the paths to securing future economic opportunities is going to be figuring out a way to accelerate investments in rail that will connect industrial parks, ports, and work in concert with the trucking industry to create new opportunities. So this would give you kind of a snapshot of what you all probably know. Very robust rail network, more than a dozen short lines railroads in the state. You've got Savannah and Brunswick from the port's perspective, and so very well positioned. I think the thing I would highlight is there are two of the top 5 bottlenecks in the U.S. that are located in the state, and you got a number of other congestion points. And so as you look at the freight demand increasing over time, and how do we alleviate some of these bottlenecks and create some of these opportunities, it's really going to end up being a lot of the rural areas, and it's going to be tapping into the existing rail infrastructure. This map will kind of show you, on the left, as you're looking at this, you can see the suburban Atlanta area, you can see Savannah, and the red really kind of highlights where there's congestion points. To the right is the rail system in Georgia. And so you can kind of see where there's pretty robust infrastructure that's in place that's outside of a lot of these congestion points. And so that's something we'll get back to here in a little bit. All comes down to economic development, really, at the end of the day. And Justin, maybe I'll have you kind of articulate this. But these projects are expensive. They're really competitive. And one of the challenges across the country, but in all states, and here in Georgia, we'll talk a little bit about it, is good economic development sites, 100 acres and up, are limited. They're hard to find. And when you narrow that funnel down further and say, what are 100-acre sites that we have that are connected to rail, they're hard to find. And in economic development, if you have a good site that's got the necessary infrastructure and you're connected to rail, you are in the mix for being considered for the opportunities. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
It's very true. As many of y'all know, economic development is a game of elimination. So it's having the right site at the right time with the right infrastructure for the right project in order to land that job-creating entity. It's going to bring new jobs to your community and new investment. I mean, just earlier, while I was listening to a previous presentation, was filling out an RFI for one of our sites because it's due Friday. And I knew I wasn't going to get to it unless I did it today. And it's Josh Stevens can attest, it's a timing thing a lot of times of having all the right pieces in place at the right time to win a project. For Georgia sites, we're a victim of our own success in that Georgia's been so successful the last 10 years that a lot of sites have either been sold or developed or turned over and are no longer available. And so to have a rail-served site and land a rail-served customer is sometimes like catching lightning in a bottle. You got, like I said, you got to be at the right place at the right time in order to do it. It's expensive. Rail's about $3 million a mile to develop currently. So if you don't have it, it's hard to spend the money up front to get the rail infrastructure to your site in order to have it right when you need it, to be able to catch that lightning in a bottle. And so for us, we are constantly working towards new site development, encouraging the communities where we have railroads to have new industrial product, new industrial sites. Even if it's just a flat site with some infrastructure next to a rail line, it's better than not having a site at all. And so what Ryan and I have looked at, and what we've looked at in conjunction with other leadership from across economic development in Georgia, is where are those sites, and how do we get rail to them in order to be competitive and continue Georgia being the #1 state to do business.
So there's 102 industrial development sites that have been identified through working with Select Georgia that are 100 acres and up that are not currently served by rail. 46 of the sites are within 1 mile of rail. And as Justin articulated, it's $3 million a mile to basically think of it building an off-ramp out to catch the industrial site. That doesn't include land acquisition, that doesn't include access roads, it doesn't include a lot of the other infrastructure, but the rail's a big piece of it. We had the optometry people here earlier, so I don't know if anybody can actually read this, but this is just an extrapolation of roughly 30 sites, and these are 30 sites that are 100 acres and up that don't have rail. It's sorted by county, but these are members of the Rural Development Council. So these are sites just related to you all here, and you can maybe see some of them. This, as Justin pointed out, some of this data changes because there might be a land sale here or there, but the back of the envelope math says if we have these 30 sites and we try to bring rail to every one of these sites, it's $150 million without blinking. So just when you think in kind of broad perspective of what sort of investment you're looking at just to bring the rail, assuming all the other kind of items kind of fall into place and you get that lightning in a bottle, it just kind of gives you a picture of that. And we can follow up if any of you have any specific questions as it relates. There's plenty of information out there that can kind of show you. So these are just a couple, examples. If you kind of go clockwise, that's a site up in Effingham County. There's one down in Dublin, Georgia, Lawrence County there in the bottom right, and then one that's just south of Macon there in Houston County. And so these sites are out there. There's information, but kind of give you an idea. But the three that are here, there's land available, but there's not rail. So you're kind of like, all right, well, where are you guys going with this? What do we do about this to be more competitive from an economic development perspective? This issue is not just specific to Georgia. It's one that folks are wrestling with throughout the Southeast and across the country. Is like, how do we pay for it? There's a lot of different incentives out there for jobs, locating projects, et cetera. And several years ago in the state of Oklahoma, the short line railroads, the economic developers, and it was sort of in conjunction with Omnitracks and some others, said, we need to come up with a way to bridge the gap here where there's a way to pay for the rail, where it could either be the railroad or it could be the customer, but we need kind of some additional incentive that can help us bring in business, particularly in the rural areas. And so the legislature in Oklahoma passed an industrial development tax credit program in their state in 2022. They went with a $12 million a year pilot program. It was slated to be $40 million, but they cut it back due to some budget negotiations. and it really is two components. There's a tax credit for building out the rail infrastructure to connect sites, and then they've got an additive credit that can help bring the business in. They're in year 2 of the program in Oklahoma. The first year was oversubscribed, the first 12 million in like the first 4 months of the program being available. This is year 2. They've far exceeded the cap, and so the message there is it is working. They're starting to see successes in a lot of the different rural areas. They're a lithium-ion battery recycling facility that required some rail, a food processing facility. The one in the middle there, which is just recent, there's a roughly $100 million investment that's taking place in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And a company from Ireland is purchasing a facility, basically revamping it and building out rail to connect doing building products. So we're talking to the CEO of the company, from the company in Ireland, and he said, we used Deloitte out of Boston. We were looking at sites, and this program was the reason we picked Oklahoma, because there was a way to help us pay for the rail and locate the thing. And they had considered like a dozen states. So this sort of model and success led to some conversations with Omnitrax and said, hey, maybe this is something we can look at in the state of Georgia that could help us leverage some of the other existing incentives. And so I don't know if you want to chime in.
This is why it was important for me, for Ryan, with his national perspective, to come and share with you all today, because it speaks to the competitiveness that we have to maintain. I was born in Albany. I've lived in Albany my whole life, but I work for a company that has railroads all over the country. My focus is still to help get the best jobs and the best companies to the state of Georgia, because we have 4 great railroads here. But I mentioned earlier working on an RFI, it's across 7 different states. And so when we see a competitiveness factor like this, and this program that's working in Oklahoma, I want to make sure that Georgia has all the competitive advantages it can take on in order to help us keep winning projects. And sometimes that key difference that it comes down to is there an opportunity for funding for infrastructure to be made available for a project that's going to keep rail in the ground for a long period of time and take trucks off the road and make our streets safer for traffic. And so that's why we're here today talking to you, to share more about how this program has worked in other places around the country and how we want to keep Georgia competitive in its tax credit advantages that we can offer to businesses.
So about a year ago, we started socializing this concept, visited with a number of you. Representative Rick Jaspers was very generous to say, hey, this is something that's interesting to me and would sure love to help the industry, the rail industry, the short lines, and particularly the rural areas, advance some legislation like this. And so thank you to Representative Jaspers, and if you have anything you want to chime in and add as we're going along here, please feel free. But there was a bill that was introduced last session, HB 1357. I would say we just socialized this, given sort of the environment last year, did have a hearing in front of Ways and Means and said, hey, if we tried to frame this up somewhat to how they're doing it in Oklahoma, how would it look here, and how would we be successful? And so we've taken the off season, if you will, to visit with folks and solicit interest. And I think the general feedback is there is a need for this. There is a need in the economic toolbox, if you will, to have something that can help pay for infrastructure. We're still kind of painting the canvas a little bit on what this could look like, but I think the intention would be, with the support of Representative Jaspers, to move this again next session, and sure would look for some support from you all in the room here, but really would function mainly as a tax credit incentive to build rail infrastructure to connect to some of these industrial parks. There'd be project caps in place. It'd be directed at the rural areas, but it's important to point out, like kind of Justin emphasized, is it's not a handout. This is a program where you got to have steel in the ground. You got to be building the off-ramp that's connecting to the customers of the industrial parks in order for there to be any impact to the state. And if there's anything that's certain with a lot of these economic development projects, they need to be pretty well baked and a sure thing if you're going to start making significant investments to connect these projects to the national rail network. We have visited with the Georgia Economic Developers, Sam Nunn's group at the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, and Chris Nunn, sorry. Yep. And the feedback has been positive. I don't, you want to add anything to that, or?
You know, what I would add to this is some of the information about railroads that I appreciate. You know, I get to work and build rail sites every day as part of my job. My dad built overhead power lines for his career. My granddad worked for Southern Bell building telephone lines. And so my joke has always been I'm working in an older school industry than my dad and my granddad did. But it's something that I can look at and see that when you make an investment in infrastructure for rail, it stays around for a long time. We still use rail line that was built in the 1910s. I mean, rail lasts. You work on it. You keep it in good shape. It takes trucks off the road. There's data from 2021 that says rail in Georgia, the rail infrastructure that we have, took almost 2.1 million trucks off of the road that weren't, you know, causing degradation to state-funded roads or getting in the way of traffic. So rail is 75% more fuel efficient than trucks. It's safer. Jobs associated with rail, with industries that use rail service, pay higher wages. And so for me, as an economic developer my whole career, to be able to work towards developing new rail infrastructure and realize that it is an old school industry, but it's still very viable and very relevant in helping with the supply chain congestion issues that we have here, is something that makes me very proud. And something that I want to see continue to grow.
So this would be kind of like a hypothetical example of like, okay, well, how would this work, and why is this relevant? And this is a site, you know, an OmniTrack site down in Albany, and maybe you can speak to this particular site, but it's one that's north of 100 acres, doesn't have rail access, but a lot of the conversation is, okay, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to build a $50 or $60 million facility, and it's going to require a significant amount of rail infrastructure to get there. And it's sort of a, well, is the railroad paying for it? Does the customer want to pay for it and own it? What's the contribution locally from the economic development folks? And so this tool becomes something that provides flexibility for building out the necessary rail infrastructure. It also provides a potential incentive that could help lure the business in if you're competing against an Alabama or a South Carolina or a Florida. And so happy to kind of walk you through it, but this just to give you kind of a flavor of when the railroads and the economic development folks are looking at, hey, here's a site, and in real terms, where would the potential benefit of this be? So to close it out, we appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. There's significant rail infrastructure investment that's needed in the state to handle the future development opportunities that are out there. And this includes the development of rail-served industrial parks, intermodal opportunities, helping finance and build out transload facilities to ease supply chain congestion. Deferred investments will lead to missed opportunities, and that'll create more challenges down the road. And so really appreciate the opportunity and really would look for the support of the Rural Development Council as we look to the 2025 legislative session to get something like this in place that can help the short lines in the state, the local economic developers, have another tool to be competitive in a very, you know, competitive economic development landscape. And so thank you. I welcome any questions. Anything you want to add?
Any questions for us?
Do we have any questions? Yes. Chairman Werkhausen.
Hey, I was just looking up history because I remember, this sounds very familiar, in 2019, we did a tax credit at $3,500 a mile, and then it was going to, did we not renew the sunset? Is that what?
That's up in 2 years, I believe, and that's a maintenance tax credit.
Okay, so this would be for maintenance, and yours is more new, for new structure.
Yeah,
okay,
new.
Just because I remember.
New track construction.
This committee
Yes, sir.
got behind that one, so yeah, would love to see us help Rick. Yeah.
And I tell you, I was in front of this group 7 years ago and talked about that original short line maintenance tax credit. And at the time the state of Georgia passed that program, there were 2 other states that had it. Now you've got 12 states that have taken the Georgia model and said, hey, this is a way to do it. But to clarify, yes, that program is available, sunsets in a couple years, and it's to fix up the infrastructure on the existing main line to get product to and from market. And this is, think of it as we're trying to help build the off-ramp to get and connect with the new future opportunities.
Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just and Bill, if you look in the budget, we do put significant dollars into fortifying existing rail to get the weight up, because as over time, a lot of it's just degraded. But, I met with Ryan, we met last year, talked about this. This is one of these that's a win-win. It's not like some people who come to us and say, give us. They put the money out first as a tax credit, and it's expensive, but it's hard to believe that it's that much a mile. But when you look what goes into a rail, it's there. It makes Darlene happy sitting beside me because it takes trucks off the road. We've been giggling about that. But if you look around the state, if you've got a short line rail in your community, there is always development around a siding. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, in Murray County, where I used to represent, we have the inland port and the sidings there. It's exploded. In my town, I have Georgia Marble and Huber and all these other mining things that are on our rail, but they pay off. They pay off for communities. That's why we're pretty excited. I had it in Shaw's committee last year just to look at it, to talk about it, because those things take time to cook. But I think it's a great thing. It's a great idea that we have.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Do we have other members that wish to speak or ask a question? Justin, and certainly Ryan, we appreciate the information that you have brought to us today. And in our recommendations, we will rely on you, Mr. Chairman, Jasper, to help us word what we need to put in our recommendations and things on that. And
Thank you.
Barbara says you are doing a good job, Justin, because
Thank you. Yeah.
she said you're bringing a worthwhile project to all of us. Undoubtedly, they're keeping up with us and watching it on the resources that we've allocated to the state here. So, if there are no other questions, we thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
you,
you
Mr.
all.
Chairman, members.
We
Thank you
hope
all.
to see y'all in Atlanta.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
Don't move yet. All right. We will meet tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., for one more presentation. And I believe that is something that Representative Chairman Stevens his group wants to present. And then we will submit any additional recommendations to Leo for our final report. If y'all have something that you want to get into the report, let's get it to Leo. And then tomorrow we'll just sort of be putting things together, and then we'll do the final report, and y'all will get a final draft and make recommendations from the draft, and then it will go on in to the Speaker's office. We have transportation provided to the Jack Hill dedication. Then we have a dinner at 6 p.m. tonight at Borough Bagel Company. And we're having bagels. We're gonna have real food, and they are catering it into that. So also see Stacy for the details of tonight for the dinner, and also please turn in your mileage to her, because we're gonna try to run you down just today, not anymore. And then Mac and I will take the vacation from the rest of the monies that were allocation.
He's a bad time.
He might like orange, but I don't.
Any other information? Anything else that we need to discuss? Well, I assume that we will see most of you tomorrow. Some of the rest of them are coming tomorrow. We've got a lot of sickness in the group. We got a lot of things that's been going on. But thank y'all for the efforts. And Lisa, thank you for the lemons that you brought to share with us. And we certainly,
Where's mine?
they're right over there on the table.
Thank you, Lisa.
And get you some of those little satsumas. And so y'all won't starve to death tonight because we're going to have bagels, you think? All right. All right, let's go load up on the bus then, and we'll head out to the dedication. If they were-